I think we're
good?
being the final four.
Awesome. Well, welcome everybody to.
Is your mic on?
Welcome everybody to the St. Patrick's Day edition of your Cincinnati Public Schools Policy and Equity Committee. We will begin, as we always begin, with a round of introductions. So your name and who you're with, and we'll start with the man behind the curtain, Mr. Rob.
CFT Field Representative.
Jennifer Wagner, Treasurer and Chief Financial Officer.
Mary Weinberg.
Mike Morosky, board member.
Eve Bolton, Board Member.
I guess I should have.
Dan Hoying, General Counsel.
Jason Stuckey with the law firm of Bricker and Eckler.
Kate Davis with the law firm of Bricker and Eckler.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here, everybody. Go ahead, Mary. Yeah, Mary would like to reintroduce herself. Go ahead.
So I left off that I'm also a board member. Sorry about that.
Mary is also a board member. And our two recent guests who just walked in, could you please introduce yourself, Ms. Scott?
Stephanie Scott, Assistant General Counsel for the district.
Thank you so much for being here. And then the woman who holds it all together, who's walking to her seat now. If you could introduce yourself, Ms. Grable. Awesome. Thank you all very much for being here. We have a small but mighty and very important agenda, as we like to do in Policy Committee. We're going to kick off with our guests. I'm going to turn it over to our General Counsel, Dan Hoying, to kick off this discussion on a Title IX policy with our outside counsel.
Thank you. Good morning. Yeah, we talked about this in the last year's version of the Policy Committee and suggested that we take a look at our Title IX policy specifically. We have a harassment policy, 2260.02, I believe, relates to harassment. Title IX has some special nuances, and there's been a lot of guidance issued by the Department of Education about what school districts should include in that policy. And so we asked for our outside counsel at Bricker and Eckler to suggest a draft to us, and so I'll turn it over to them for sort of a brief description of what they've proposed for us and what we should be considering. Thanks, Jason.
No problem. Thank you, Dan, for having us. And once again, my name is Jason Stuckey with the law firm of Bricker and Eckler, where I'm a partner. I have my colleague Kate Davis here with me today. And so Kate and I, at Dan and Stephanie's request, did a policy revision or policy suggestions regarding Title IX in light of the changes that were made to Title IX regulations by the Department of Education. And I'm going to have Kate provide a deep dive or overview of some of the changes that we made, but really a lot of the changes that were made by the Department of Education relate to the process for Title IX and the procedures in that vein. So Kate, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Jason. So thank you for having us here today. So one thing I guess right off the bat is in the packet you've got are copies of two different documents. And if you'll see, the first one says procedures in the title. I actually would direct you to the second document first, because that's the actual policy. And there is a method to our madness of breaking this up into the two documents, because the policy is what you guys do, right? You review it, you know, fine tune it, all the things, right? And we wanted to break out the procedures into a separate document to make it hopefully more nimble for you all to change it as the law changes, because for those of you, if you have followed Title IX, I describe it, the law in this area is like watching a tennis match, where depending on who is in office at the time, it changes. So given, you know, who knows what's going to happen in the 2024 election, there could be changes again. We're currently anticipating some changes to come from the Biden administration. So that's a long way of saying that's why we broke it up into a policy, which is shorter. And then hopefully some of the more detailed in the weeds kind of process stuff is in that second document called the procedures. So that was the reasoning behind that. So if you turn to the policy document, which is the shorter of the two, we tried to keep that to just the basics of what the law requires. So this is a heavily regulated area of the law. It's federal law. And in 2020, new regulations were put out by the federal government to prescribe how sex harassment under Title IX must be handled by schools. So it's very prescriptive. It's like you have to have different roles. You have to have a Title IX coordinator that is published in your policy, and your policy has to go on your, I mean, they get into instructing schools, directing schools that your policy has to be on your website with the coordinator's phone number and email address so that people know how to reach them. So it's that level of rules and kind of oversight from the government in that way on schools. So that's why on the first page of the policy, you'll see highlighted name of the coordinator, title, phone, email, address. That's actually from the law that tells me, you know, we have to have that in there. And then the rest of the policy, we try to keep it to the basics, including definitions that, again, come straight from the regulations. So these aren't, you know, there's no wiggle room in those. They're cut and pasted from the law. If you go to Roman numeral 3, on page 3 of the policy, that's where we discuss the privacy and confidentiality rules, which again these are specific to Title IX sexual harassment, and how that works. And because it is different probably from what you're used to in the school world of FERPA and confidentiality, right? Roughly speaking, in the Title IX world, it's much more transparent. So we get questions during Title IX investigations like, do we redact student names from witness statements? And the answer is no. Because the law says in this space, we want, you know, everything is very transparent and the parties are going to have access to all the information. So that's a bit of a change from maybe how you're, you know, typically operating. So that's covered on page 3. And then I'd also point you on page 4 to Roman numeral 5. This is kind of the heart of what Title IX sexual harassment looks like and how it's defined. So Title IX sexual harassment means something very specific under the law. Harassment, right? You've had harassment policies for years, I'm sure, right? And if you had somebody allege some kind of sexual harassment, you would have gone to those policies. Now, what this law is saying is if it meets one of these specific definitions, and they're kind of narrow if you read them, right? But if they fit one of these definitions, you have to follow this policy and these specific procedures. And that's what's in the second document. So the coordinator will have to do intake if they get a complaint to first decide whether we're even in this world or not, right? Because if it's some kind of other harassment, maybe it doesn't rise to the level of sexual harassment under Title IX, then you would probably likely be looking at your code of conduct or another general harassment policy.
And we'll talk about, and when we get to the procedures, why that distinction is important, because the way the harassment policies currently work is that there is one person who can do the intake, who can do the investigation, termination. The way Title IX is promulgated is that there have to be different individuals for those roles. And so if something falls outside the scope of the policy, of the Title IX policy, you wouldn't need to have different folks to serve in those roles. So that's why it's important to understand the difference between what falls under the policy and what does not fall under the policy.
So if you want to turn to the procedures document now, again, I mean, we could spend, hours probably, going, it's what, 9 pages long. So I'll just hit some of the highlights. So a couple just concepts. So as Jason was saying, what they call it the siloing of the roles in Title IX, and the theory anyway, people could agree or disagree, but the concept was that by having a separate investigator and a separate decision maker and a separate appeals officer who's all somebody different from the coordinator, that maybe it will be more fair because we're having different people do different objective pieces of a case. So that's the reason behind it. So on page 1 of the procedures, we talk about supportive measures. You may have heard of the phrase interim measures in the past. This is the idea of these are things we can do to help people that are involved in a case that aren't disciplined, that aren't, these are things like offering counseling or extensions on homework assignments, or if it's an employee, reassignment of a shift. That reminds me, I should mention too, this applies to everybody in your building. So you could have a student Title IX case, or you could have a staff Title IX case. You could have a staff student Title IX case, right? You could, it's everyone in the building, which is a little different too from the way there used to be a question under Title IX of does it apply to employees? Now we know that's clear under the law, it does. So then what I do a lot of training on for schools is number 2. And that is the actual process of how do you do an investigation. Once you have a complaint, we know it's Title IX, now what? And the next several pages are all the rules that come from the regulations about how you do that. One of the key pieces on page 2, I would say, is the letter C, bias and conflicts of interest. Transparency is a big part of the rules, right? How I said it, we're not always following our typical FERPA way of doing things. Bias and conflict of interest is another big piece that's emphasized in the law, and that's why they siloed the roles. And also, anyone on the team, the Title IX team, so an investigator, a coordinator, a decision maker, has to have training on avoiding bias and conflicts of interest. So that's why that part of that training is in every session we do for anyone on the team, because it's required by law. And that is another reason that the U.S. Department of Education determined that schools can keep these cases in-house. You don't have to outsource it to somebody. You can have a principal be an investigator. That's fine, as long as they've been trained on avoiding bias and conflict of interest. And then let's go to.
And it might be helpful, Kate, maybe just to outline what the specific roles are in the process.
Okay, sure.
So the first role is there has to be a Title IX coordinator, and that has to be a district employee. The next role is the role of the investigator. Typically, that could be housed in-house, but that could also be outsourced depending on the factual circumstances. The next part of the process is after the investigator completes their factual investigative report, they do not make any determination on whether or not there's been a violation of the Title IX policy. That is left to the next person in the process, who is the decision maker. That decision maker gets the investigative report and then makes a determination on whether or not there's been a violation of the Title IX policy. At that point in time, either party has the opportunity to appeal the decision by the decision maker, and then that goes to a separate appeals officer. And every person who serves in each of those different roles needs to be trained in each of those roles. So that's a complete departure from how the process used to work, where it could be one person who would serve in all of those roles.
Yep. Thank you. So I won't get into, a lot of this is kind of in the weeds, and that's why it's separated out into the separate procedures document. So if you guys have any specific questions, let me know. I think what I would like to point out to you all, though, is on page 8, informal resolution. This is a great option if it is permissible in a certain case. So this is separate and apart from all the process-heavy, rules-heavy investigation steps we were just talking about. This is basically like mediation. It's not called mediation, but it's a form of mediation where it doesn't work in all cases, but we would highly recommend it in a case that works. So usually, typically maybe verbal harassment. You're not going to use this in some kind of physical assault. You're not going to say to the parties, "Hey, why don't you sit down together and work out a mutually agreeable resolution," right? But in the right case, I've seen it work wonders, and it's much faster. The parties typically end up more satisfied because they have some control over the outcome. I'm sure you've used that type of thing in other situations. It's not, it's used in special ed, it's used in labor negotiations. It's the same concept. So I just wanted to point out that's an option. Again, you just would need to have somebody trained in it, and you could keep it in-house.
Yep. And the one thing I will add to that, the law already provides for an exception that you cannot use informal resolution if it's a staff member on student sexual harassment.
Which makes sense.
Yeah,
you wouldn't, there's a power imbalance there. So with that, I can open it up to any questions that you have.
It was great. That was extraordinarily succinct. Thank you. There's a lot of information here. I would just, before I open it up to my colleagues for questions, would turn it over to General Counsel's office. Do you have anything you want to add to that, or?
No, I think we have had, I think our current practice is consistent with this, but we need it to be more robust.
Okay.
And so we would urge the board to move forward with this, and then we'll get started on some of the training, and we have roles identified already for the investigative role and the.
Okay, that's good enough for me. I'll turn it to my colleagues, Ms. Bolton, Ms. Lumley.
The only question that I would have, everything looks great as you're talking about training and things of that nature. Do you have a time frame of what that training would consist of?
So we'll actually work with Bricker and Eckler, I think, on that. They provide training for, and they've provided to us a cost estimate and recommendation, and it's very consistent with what we would expect in terms of this kind of training. So I hope by the end of this school year we're underway.
So how long would the training be?
How long will it take
For the individuals to be trained?
You want to say a little bit more about
Yeah, we can talk about that. So our goal with the training and what we've done before in other districts is that it's best to cross-train the folks who will be serving in the roles. So that can be completed in 1 to 2 days. And what we would do is we would bring everybody in, if there's some type of administrator in service, and provide the training on the multiple roles in that capacity.
Yep. And then, the nice thing about it too is when you have general counsel, you guys you can train the people. And then, you all can be support behind the scenes. So that's, that's how I've seen it work. So, because there is for sure a learning curve, right? You give somebody a case like this for the first time, but you can be there to kind of behind the scenes be helping them. Yeah. That's how I would envision that working.
Thank you.
Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Who all would be trained?
So it included, and I'll let you guys say something too, the Title IX coordinator. We have identified already a Title IX coordinator in our current policies. The Title IX investigator, Title IX decision maker. And those are really the 3 key roles. Others that you would add to that?
Yeah, the appeals officer would also need to be trained. And then the other work, I would say, in the Title IX regulations is that all employees technically do need to be trained, but that does that necessarily need to be live and in person, Kate? It does not. So that could be something that could be recorded and could be out.
So we do that through Safe Schools or through in-services with principals.
Okay. And would there be any way that would all be able to be done over the summer or the current school year?
Sure.
Okay. You made some reference regarding staff and student or whatever. What do you, we have a whole bunch of people in our buildings that aren't really technically staff. They may be providing other services. They might be contractors. Yeah, and partners and people that are volunteers or whatever. How do they fit into that definition?
I would say from the legal liability standpoint, I would view them the same. Right? If they're in your building, they're part of your education program. If they're harassing someone, that the victim of the harassment could file a complaint under this policy, and we would need to investigate it.
So they would be considered as staff.
I think for purposes of the investigation, yes.
Okay, thanks.
I think because the idea, if you take kind of the big picture view of all of this, I always come back to, what's the point of all of this, right? We're in the weeds, but like the point of it is to stop this kind of harassment and prevent it from happening. Mm-hmm. So if you've got somebody in your building that's harassing somebody, the law isn't going to be like, oh, well, it doesn't matter because, they were a contractor, right? They're going to say within your building, you need to address it.
Thanks.
Good, Ms. Bolton?
Mm-hmm.
So the recommendation from General Counsel, if I understand correctly, is that we move forward with this. We could pass this in front of the board as is. Would the procedures then kind of be an addendum in the policy?
We can make them an addendum. I don't think the procedures necessarily need to be passed by the board, but we would want the board to see that.
That's cool.
That there's. That's right.
Great.
The format that you see, would this be in a format more in keeping with our policies?
Of course. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you.
So committee is fine with this, moving ahead to the board?
I'm fine with it.
Awesome. Thank you all. Thank you all so much. You're welcome to stick around. We're gonna have a lot of fun, but you can also leave. And
Have a great day.
it's true. You know, that is true. We are a pretty agreeable bunch. Thank you all so much. We really, and thank you ahead of time for the work you'll be doing with the training. Excellent. And our friend Zach from WVXU walked in, so I want to recognize him. Thanks for being here, sir, and covering the important work. And Miss Julie Sellers, the president of Cincinnati Federation of Teachers. All right, let's moving on with we have two policies next that we have been talking about for some time, and we will eventually get these to the rest of our colleagues to vote upon them, perhaps even after today's meeting. If not, that's okay, because this stuff is important and we don't need to rush it. The two policies are 2440, extended learning opportunities, with a special attention paid to summer learning, at least in our conversations. And then policy 5410, promotion and retention. This was, as a reminder, promotion, retention on acceleration. We removed acceleration. We already passed that as a full board, and we're still discussing promotion and retention. We got a lot of really good discussion about this. We have another new version. I've been fortunate to get a lot of feedback on these from teachers and other folks in the community. I know my colleagues have as well. So let's dive right in and see if we can't maybe get a consensus and get these policies to the full board. Before we talk, however, as customary, we'll turn it to Dan Hoying and General Counsel and see if there's updates for policy 2440 from last time.
Yes, thank you. I'll share my screen here if I can. Rob, I don't know if you have 20. Yeah, that would be great, actually. So 2440 is the extended learning programs, and especially relates to summer school. We included the recommendations or recommended language that Board Member Bolton provided. We did not include the language that specified grades 5 through 12. I think the board asked us to hold on that. We added in here that for graduation, students will have the option to participate in virtual learning opportunity. I believe we've incorporated all the comments from last month's meeting. Glad to answer any questions, or we missed anything. Glad to entertain that as well.
Open it up to my colleagues first.
I have, I know that we talked in terms of fees and monies, and we still have in there that if people are resident versus non-resident, if they're enrolled, aren't we already receiving money or something as because of open enrollment?
We are receiving if they're an open enrolled student, we would receive the state share from the other district where that student is enrolled. Wouldn't necessarily receive any additional funds for the summer, but I'm not sure that we receive any additional funds for the summer for our own students either.
Yeah, open enrollment students in the new funding formula are just counted as our students. So they just get our share.
So this was something that President Sellers brought to my attention. I mean, if the differentiation between resident versus non-resident, if people are enrolled, they're enrolled.
Correct, and the new state funding formula.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
So I appreciate that suggestion from President Sellers.
I also feel like, and the teachers that I talked to about this policy, I also feel like, and the teachers I talked to, if summer school is going to be a requirement for promotion, it's not fair to some students to say, you can come to our district, we want you here, but you're going to have to pay if you're going to need any kind of summer supports. And so we just feel like it isn't really fair for students. It should be the same criteria if they're enrolled in our district. Now, if they're coming in from another district just to take summer school at our district, that is something totally different. Like, so if they're, say, coming from a Catholic school to take summer school, or from another district to take summer school because their parents live here, that may be a different story.
Is it?
Go ahead.
Is it possible to make that differentiation? Because the justification is that they're enrolled or they're not enrolled.
This was one of my questions, so I'm appreciate. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Can we make, no, I was going to echo you. Can we make that differentiation?
What if we said tuition shall be charged for non-resident, non-enrolled students at rates determined by? Is that what you're
Just
saying?
non-enrolled, right?
Because if you're a charter school student.
Yeah,
got it.
summer school.
Just
So
non-enrolled.
non-enrolled students.
Just non-enrolled.
Mhm.
It's not non-resident, it's
Yeah,
non-enrolled.
non-enrolled.
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
That's a good change.
Okay. I can mark that off. Cool. Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, I have a question for graduation. I kind of felt that this opened virtual learning throughout for all. Am I reading it incorrectly?
You're not reading it
section?
incorrectly. I thought this came from the superintendent, I believe, at the last meeting, that she said for graduation coursework, students should have the option to participate in virtual or remote. You're saying you'd like to see that?
I think let's get with the program from a standpoint of, let's face it, the district has to review summer school anyway.
Correct.
From a
Right.
cost experience, from a technology experience, from a transportation experience. This, we whether or not we can fully afford virtually a fifth quarter of school, which it has become. Our students need it, our families need it, but it would seem to me that this should be as open-ended and as restrictive as possible.
To take out that qualifier for graduation coursework.
You know, I think that's true. I mean, I think that would be true, but I think that's true for others as well because of transportation and work, and some kids need summer for other things.
So I'm a little confused, Board Member Bolton. Can you just express, are you talking about the section where it says for graduation coursework, students should have the option? Is that where you are?
Yeah.
And what are you saying that
I'm
you
saying
don't?
that should be expanded
And it should be expanded to say what?
to include other students, not just a qualifier about graduation, which is, I think, what's in the, I would like it to be more expansive.
Oh, so instead of saying for graduation coursework,
Yeah.
it should say something else, but still have that student should have the option to participate in virtual remote learning.
Oh,
platform.
gosh, yeah.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. I was thinking you were saying something else at first.
No,
Okay, so for graduation coursework should be changed. Gotcha.
Jen has-
Jen?
Yeah, thank you. So it occurred to me and Julie at the same time that we want to say enrolled for at least 100 days, because you don't want somebody enrolling the last week just to go to
gosh.
summer school free.
Oh,
Or
that
like
makes sense, I
system-
guess.
Smart.
Enrolling for a couple of days and then they go,
Hey,
they
you're
get the
enrolled.
voucher.
They did that with the voucher.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
smart. Yeah.
gosh.
Yep.
Good
Isn't it
point.
terrible to have to be so simple?
It totally. Yeah. Well,
Well.
I mean, it's
you know what
real. Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So for the graduation, real quick, and then we'll let you finish and then get
Okay.
over to Mary. Or if you have something about this, feel free to speak up too, because we're going to be free flowing here. We're all so familiar with this. For graduation coursework, is the original, excuse me, version of this just didn't even have that. I mean, is it as simple as just excising that and just having students should have the option? Is that
That could be.
That's what yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
right? Okay. Cool. All right. Sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Bolton.
Is this, just two last things, does this in any way require or mandate in-person attendance in this policy?
It says in person should not
The
be
next
required.
sentence says in-person instruction should not be required.
Right.
Okay, that's period.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I want to lay that groundwork because the other last thing, and Daniel, no, I do this all the time. 3 paragraphs up where it talks about board policy or district guidelines.
Where are you seeing that?
Up.
Oh,
Go from the bottom.
2 more up. Yeah. As
The 2
extended
more up.
learning. Yeah.
See
As,
that?
mm-hmm.
That's something we struck from, just as we got ready to pass one of these last policies. It had district guidelines in it, because what this assumes, and maybe it's true, maybe I'm being hypersensitive, but we're saying that the district guidelines are at the level of board policy.
And they're not.
They are not.
Right. So excise that as well.
Yeah, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
however, I mean, whatever you think's best, but that assumes a parallel structure. And I mean, you guys have to figure out how to do all this, but also you can write guidelines that undo policy, frankly. I know you would never do that.
I would never.
Would not. That's fine.
Oh, God.
Wait, Ms. Sellers?
One of the things that I just want to remind people is our contracts, all of the contracts are above or higher than board policy.
No comment.
Ours are become,
What I'm frequently asked, our office is frequently asked, what trumps what? Most of the time, our answer is we have to follow all of them. We have to follow the collective bargaining agreement, and we have to follow board
but
policy.
for example, if the board says board policy is 100 students and our contract says it's 25, you can't trump us because it's been negotiated and
Well-
signed off on by the board.
Well, I didn't raise that issue.
No.
I'm
Oh, okay.
talking about parallel of the board to the administration that
But
reports to the
sometimes
board.
administration sets policy based on how they,
Well, they don't set policy.
don't.
no, they don't set policy, I mean guidelines.
Okay.
They don't set policy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Good conversation.
No, that's right. Okay. Ms. Bolton or Ms. Weinberg?
Were you done? Were you done?
I am done
Okay.
and can't wait to pass this.
So I did have one concern, and I'm actually
Go
gonna
ahead.
scoot my little paper up to the bottom paragraph where it says consideration to students who have individual education plans, IEPs for extended school year, blah, 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 blah. I had a couple of questions regarding that.
Sure.
And when we're saying IEPs, are we also including our English language learners and those students who are on LEPs? So if we're offering summer school, for example, it was brought up to me in the community that a student was told that they would not be eligible for their resources in summer school due to the particular teacher that they had, whether the teacher was to speak to the child in Spanish, etc., giving them the language or coursework in Spanish. And if we are giving them the online option, I can never say this word, edgenuity, I think that's what it is that offered in other languages? And how will we include the other students to be able to make sure that they're getting what they need in this particular paragraph?
Yeah, so a couple different things. One, ESY is sort of a term of art that relates to students with disabilities. There's a meeting that's held with any kid on an IEP, as you know, at near the end of the school year to say, does this student qualify for IEP services over the summer? And there's certain reasons that the student might be eligible for that. So I don't think that same meeting is held with an ESY student. There's not the same kind of, with an LEP student, with a language student. However, programs that are offered during the summer by the school districts still have to provide accommodations to students who have language deficiencies.
What if they do not?
What
Or what if they aren't?
programs do not? Then that should be brought to our attention, because we still have, the programs, we have a duty to provide services for students with language deficiencies in all the programs and offerings that the district has, including summer school. So we would have to do that.
Okay.
Your specific question about edgenuity, I believe it is offered in other
And
languages.
he has a translation.
Yeah.
It does. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, well then I guess my little suggestion probably would not fit in there. I just wanted to make sure that they were given the same opportunities. Because it does say for extended school year, ESY learning opportunities, students who qualify may be also eligible for transportation, et cetera, et cetera. I had put into my suggestion that they would have their additional resources as they would during the school year. But if it doesn't apply, then you said it may.
I'm not sure it fits in the ESY paragraph, but I think your sentiment is still valid there.
Okay.
That
So would that be an additional paragraph?
I think it might be. Maybe before that, so we're not confusing it with the ESY. Yeah, we can add a sentence there that says accommodations for students with language deficiencies should be provided in the school.
Yes.
No.
Thank
I
you.
want to say deficiencies.
Yeah. No,
Ms. Bolton, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just at the last paragraph that's there, it says superintendent designate. I would prefer that be superintendent or superintendent designate. I would like the superintendent to be able to have something to say about it rather than
Did you get that?
simply go with
Here, you
designate.
have one.
The last paragraph, superintendent designate.
Yeah.
I would like that to be a level of the superintendent, and if she didn't or he didn't want to make that decision, he'd have to appoint.
Got it.
Oh, I see.
So take out designate.
Yeah.
Got it. So the sentence, Board Member Weinberg, accommodations for English language learners must be provided for summer program. That's meets your, got it.
Anyone else right now? Comments on extended learning?
That's a good ad.
I think it's a good ad
Great
too.
ad.
I think it's a great ad. Mary, did you want to say anything, or did you when I was gone about the 2 to 12 piece?
Oh, yes, thank you. I forgot about that.
I got you.
So, rationale or reasoning behind why the 2 through 12 was taken out, or the 5 through 12 originally, or was it 5 through 9? I don't even
It
remember
was
now.
5 through 12.
And then remember we had suggested including 2 through 12. Is there a reason why that was not included?
I think it just says all levels now instead.
All levels?
Yeah, it just says all levels at the tippy top. Second sentence. Second.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Good.
Yes.
Cool. Anyone else? Are we good? We can pass
All right.
this to the full board. Could we do it by Monday?
Sure.
Cool.
Wait a minute, it got a little quiet.
Can you do it, Phyllis? If you can't, can you do it? All right. If you can do it.
Phyllis.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. This has been really great. We have spent a lot of time doing this. I feel good about it. I'm glad everyone else does. So thank you. And thank you for all the help too from our friends. Next, 5410, promotion and retention. As always, we'll turn it over to General Counsel to give us an update on what has been added or taken out.
Rob, are you able to bring that one up? Great, thank you. Okay, so this has also come back to us multiple times. We've added, I think we've changed the first paragraph, first 2 paragraphs in a manner that the board requested, eliminating the notion that social promotion is always for the best, I think, but and rather making that language that I think softening that language in the first several paragraphs.
Or hardening it.
You think? The reason I think that this has come back to the policy committee so often is those first several paragraphs that relate to what previously seemed to be the position of the board, that social promotion was always kind of in the best interest of students. We've now said it's so this is reading from the second paragraph. It is the board's intent that each student successfully promote in a continuous pattern. And then going down to the 4th paragraph, the student shall be promoted to the next grade level when it is in the best interest of that student's academic achievement, as well as the student's social and emotional development. Taking out the next 2 sentences, promotion is essential, or the student will be promoted, where there's no state mandated measure that he or she remain in place. So again, I think that's consistent with where the board was during the last meeting, but I'm glad to take your questions on that or suggestions. Those were the major changes, I think, from last month.
All right.
I still would like to see some kind of active role of the school and the professionals in helping to determine that.
That's in the second, it's in the second paragraph.
But well, I mean, but that first sentence kind of leans us. That I mean, I don't know. It just seems a little incongruent with the rest of it. But maybe I'm too hyper about that one.
What verbiage are you thinking?
Well, I'm just saying that it's when it's in the best interest. Okay, and then we talk about how that gets determined, but I won't know. I don't know why that wouldn't be. I don't know why that wouldn't be included in that says it when it's in the best interest.
So you're asking to put in a piece regarding
How that, not just how is that determined, but when it's determined.
the student shall be promoted to the next grade level when it is in the best interest of the student's academic achievement as well as
You know, when it
information
is determined,
from-
when it is determined. I mean, who's, and that would describe a role, not just a procedure.
right. Okay.
There's a role for the professionals to determine that, for them to play. I might be in left field on that one.
I mean, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. And it does say it then in the following paragraph,
Mhm.
but you're saying that you want it to just be up front also in the first paragraph.
May I interject?
Good.
CFT is proposing some changes to the second to last paragraph under retention, which I think would perhaps address your idea here.
Let's hear it. Yeah.
Okay, so essentially, while CFT doesn't have any issue with parents being involved in kind of the conversations, we don't believe parents have any place on the audit committee itself. So, you know, sometimes it's in the best interest, let's just say it's in the best interest of children for parents to express themselves and be heard. But when it comes down to making the final decision, we think that that is the role of the professionals who are involved. So the audit committee should be just teachers and administrators, and that is, or the audit team rather, and that is consistent with what's in the collective bargaining agreement. So we propose some modifications to make this jive with what's on page 57 at paragraph 8 of the collective bargaining agreement with respect to grading and promotion. And I wanted to send this language earlier for your consideration. I apologize that I didn't, but I could give you our proposed changes now.
Sure.
So we would suggest in that paragraph that the first sentence stay the same. To the extent possible, retention promotion decisions should be made through a collaborative effort between parents, teachers, and the principal. And then add this sentence. However, the teacher's promotion/retention decision, K through 8, may not be changed by the principal. It says that in the collective bargaining agreement. If a dispute about the decision cannot be, about the promotion retention decision cannot be resolved through collaboration, the principal may request a district audit team composed of teachers and administrators, and then delete "and parents" to examine the teacher's documentation and, if needed, evaluate the school's proficiency using student work. The next sentence we would keep the same, although I don't know who a school ombudsperson is, but the next sentence, school counselors, parent family advocates, or a school ombudsperson, may be involved in the audit. Keep that. But then instead of saying such team, would say the audit team shall consider the view of the parent, but only, add this language, but only CPS teachers and administrators may make the final decision to uphold or modify the teacher's promotion/retention decision. And I think that addresses, you know, the concern about having basic, like who is in the best position to make these professional decisions about whether a student is in a position to advance.
Thank you, Karen. Mary?
Just had a follow-up question. So as a parent, and I'm just coming from the parent view, what is your rationale on excluding the parent? And I know here in the verbiage, our previous board member, that was something that was very important for her, and I'm not sure if the others did agree on that. But with the parent involvement, I like having the parent involved. I like them being able to have that documentation to also view. But if you're taking that one sentence out, does it mean that they are not going to be able to see that documentation? Or what would be the process if they didn't agree?
I mean, I think that it's fine for the parent to be involved, and I think that their involvement could be very helpful. I'm sure that principals and teachers want to take into consideration the view of the parent and involve them in getting on board, you know, with the decision. But when it comes to making the final decision, we just view that as a role for the professionals. And, you know, we have some, quite honestly, some extremely aggressive parents who I don't think are in a position to make these decisions. And so, of course, we value their opinion and think it should be considered, but that they not have participation in sort of the final decision.
Go ahead.
And I can see that. I just want to make sure that we are still keeping the piece in there about the parent being involved, because I think that that's a big ordeal. They want to feel as if they have not necessarily the final decision, but a say in their child's education piece. And then my question to that would be, if they don't have a voice once that decision is made, what would be the follow-up to? Do they appeal? Do they say, okay, I'm fine with what you all decided on? I don't remember if I saw that in here.
Well, in the collective bargaining agreement, it says decisions of the audit team are final, and I think it would be appropriate to add that.
To add it in there so then they know.
So
Okay,
that they know. That's a great idea.
thank you.
Can I say one thing?
No.
Yeah, go ahead, and then I got a comment.
But we really do. And that is where the parent should be involved throughout the whole process of the school year.
Okay.
Probably starting in Q1
Okay.
and then into Q2. By Q3, they should have they should have had meetings. And so I think that because they've been involved throughout the whole process, they don't go to this audit team until after the fact if there is some other outlying thing. But the parents aren't really aware of what the state standards are
Right.
and all of it.
And my question then,
The requirements for attendance.
Mhm.
But I think starting in Q1 and
To include them in that, so they have that
needs to be
information.
something that they need
Yep.
to be.
Thanks.
and then Ms. Weinberg, you were referencing Dr. Moffat, I believe, just to be
Yes,
clear about
yes,
former colleague
yes.
who was
On-
wanted, yes, the parent. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that for everybody. I hear what you're saying. I mean, I'm glad you added the piece about the state standards. I mean, it feels to me, I mean, there are certainly decisions that are made that the parent doesn't have any part in, whether or not a kid's going to graduate, for example. I mean, there are certain things that are just have to be certain ways. I appreciate you bringing it up. I don't have any issue with it. I want to see what Ms. Bolton thinks about the suggestion.
Well, I think it actually proves why we should make that one change that I suggested, because you're up front saying that somebody is going to be determining the ultimate thing.
Yeah.
Which is, that has to be determined, and we're saying that, make that clear. I don't know that this would pass if we did what you suggest regarding the votes on the board. Not that we're not looking for 7-0. We try to, but I just think it might open up another discussion that may make some people maybe not want to vote for it. But if the school decides that a student isn't going to be promoted, they're not going to be promoted. Isn't that the authority of the school? Okay.
It wasn't.
Yeah, to your point, Julia, that's what I'm saying, is again, who has the authority? Making it very clear, if it's the school that has the authority, there might be even an easier way to say it than some of the extra words that we've been putting in. Does the school have that authority? To say you're not going to get promoted?
Yeah, is it? Do they?
You
Yes.
can't go to sixth grade.
Yes.
So I think establishing that authority is a baseline, because in this district, I don't think it is assumed by the community or by staff. So, and that's why that's one of the reasons we've been working on this.
Uh-huh.
So it seems like that has to be established, that authority exists.
It's just an issue of how it's worded, is what I hear you saying. Jen, were you going to say something?
I'm just going to offer a suggestion that maybe if you add
Yeah.
it to that a principal or the parent could ask for an audit.
That could be a good
That's
suggestion.
good.
That's a good way for the parent to appeal a decision.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, so Jen Wagner's, did you wrap all this up with a bow? Yeah.
In that one sentence, it says the principal can ask the district audit team for an appeal. Just add the principal or the parent. And that gives the parent an opportunity to be heard.
And if we add that piece, then my question becomes for my two committee colleagues. And then I'm going to have a follow-up question because I don't want to get away from Ms. Bolton's point. So I'm going to put that on the shelf real quick. But if we add that piece, would my board colleagues then be amenable to the language that Ms. Imbus was suggesting if we add this piece that Ms. Wagner was talking about. So that would be amending the line that Jen just spoke about and then accepting the language that Karen recommended. And then I'm going to get back to you though, Eve, because I want to talk about that too.
I think it's absurd to have a parent on the actual audit committee.
Okay.
I
do too.
That's just not the role,
I
but
do
we
too.
want that parent to be able to use that committee as best they can. And I have a question about teacher. I know teacher in the collective bargaining agreement means everybody, but I wonder on this audit piece, if that's just, is that the teacher of record who is actually defending themselves?
I was going to.
Or is that, okay, or should there also be somebody else that is the counselor or still within the collective bargaining unit, but not necessarily the teacher, the classroom teacher, but a psych or.
There's usually like whoever this audit team is, they're the audit team, and then the teacher comes with their record.
Right, so on the audit team, are there people that are not just classroom teachers? That's why we're here.
Correct. You're right.
Because when I would say the principals, well, they were taken to the audit team, and they were like, where's that?
Exactly. That's
Right.
So are you suggesting that we define how the audit team is comprised? At the outside?
In the policy?
well, it's just that, or give it to the guidelines, but people don't, I mean, whatever. But I just worry that it's just, that it's only not that specific teacher, but a teacher versus a psychologist or a.
I hear what you're saying. I think perhaps in the guidelines it makes sense. I mean, I'm not opposed to having it here at all. Because what you're saying makes sense.
We're trying to be transparent.
So you think it should be in the policy?
I think it should.
Okay.
If at all possible. If not, I mean.
How would that be worded then? Suggestion? No?
You're the wordsmith.
I'm the wordsmith. Go ahead, Jen.
The treasurer's the wordsmith. I love it.
She is really like rocked it today.
She's been on it
She
today.
is like been the flying force today. Go ahead, Jen.
I don't know if we can ever really sit together, so.
They might be getting too close. Magic happens in policy committee. Let's make sure that's reflected in the minutes.
Boldly typed.
Okay.
Julie said that it's the same teacher, one for each content area, but it's the same person for the entire year. So you can say the annually appointed teachers.
Okay.
And then that way it's not the teacher that's involved.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the teacher who's involved comes and brings.
So testifies or whatever, yeah.
But if the other teachers, they're not the- they make their decision, they just.
Dan, comment?
No, I think that's fine. I guess my only comment would be, I think Julie's right that we haven't had an audit team come in very often. I don't take that necessarily as this isn't a functioning process. I take it more as we have had occasions where a principal has sort of unilaterally overridden a teacher's decision, and we've had to counsel the principal on that's not consistent with the CBA. We've also had situations where I think a teacher has kind of had an anomalous decision about promotion or retention, and I think it works. The process has actually worked pretty well and collaboratively. I don't think it's been all that at odds with one another, but I think the suggestions that were made as to how to compose that audit team are fine.
Right.
And we can add that.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Wagner. Okay, so real quick, and then I want to get back to Eve. So I feel as if we have addressed the language Karen suggested, the new language that Jen has suggested in a couple different ways. That leaves on the shelf Ms. Bolton's comments about addressing some of these issues early on about school having final determination. I accept that. I think that's a fine change. I want to see what Mary thinks.
I would accept that as well.
And so then Ms. Bolton will just make sure then that counsel's office has the language. Do you feel good about? Yeah. Okay. Is this one we want to talk about again in April, or just kind of look at one more time, or are we in the place where if all of these things exist on Monday, we'd be ready to present it to the board?
I think we should present it with the edits, because I
Okay.
don't think it's going to pass the first time it comes forward.
So board matters, perhaps? Board matters discussion with Emily?
I would agree. I think that would
Agree.
be fine.
All right.
I'm hoping that it will pass, but we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I am too. I'm
Right.
I'm happy to do it. I mean, to try to get it to pass. It doesn't have to have 7-0 or whatever. But I think this is going to require
Put
some
it on for
discussion.
resolution.
This is not.
Put it on.
I mean, we could put it on. Could we do it as board matters and then, no, we can't do
No.
both.
Each one say.
Your decision.
My decision. Okay, one more comment.
I think that once this changes, I think there's going to be some education.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh.
Administrators, because
Absolutely.
this is a philosophical change
Correct. Yeah,
Mhm.
well,
that
that's,
I
yeah.
believe is going to
Yeah.
our students and families.
Yeah.
We
Absolutely.
do too. That's all. Yeah, that's an exciting thing. We feel the same way. I agree. And, you know, things like the truancy piece that was added. So thank you all for that language too, and being explicit about transportation and things like that as far as the guidance for, yeah, it's going to have to, it's a shift.
Because there is accountability for teachers
Mhm.
and district,
Yeah.
but if the kid is not in school, they never send an assignment, and they never pass a test, we're being held accountable.
Mhm.
So Mary says it's my decision. I have Ms. Bolton's comment. I think then the best way to sort of be equanimous about this is put it on as board matters, Phyllis. If we can do board matters, do this policy of board matters, and then the next board meeting, we'll go ahead and put it on the agenda.
Sounds
Great.
good.
Cool.
Good job.
Just a reminder, we made one change to the truancy policy as a part of this. We added that statutory language. So whenever this goes through board, we'll also put that truancy policy through. We'll wait until it goes through, but those will go through together.
Perfect.
Okay.
Great.
Moving
Thank
on.
y'all. This is that's a big one. That's a big one. Unlike the next one, which is no big deal. Yeah, small but mighty. So the next item is very.
I approve. Okay.
Yeah, we're good. We're move on. The next item is very simply reviewing the bylaws for the board.
It is?
We'll do that one after under other business.
Okay.
If that is that cool? If that's cool.
Just think it'd be great to have that go forward. Yeah, yeah.
Well, you know if gonna be quick, you know what? We're gonna move up other business. Yes, let's do that. The property tax abatements. This was reviewed by Finance Committee. I'm going to turn it over to the Finance Chair, Ms. Bolton. Introduce it.
And I'll do my usual. I'll pass it over. I'll introduce it, but I'll pass over
Cool.
to both General Counsel and the Treasurer for
Cool.
this.
You want to start? Or you want-
Yeah, I can, I was waiting for her to introduce it, but okay.
I said I'll
You did.
introduce
That's
it.
okay. All right, so
That
this,
counted.
this policy is just giving us the authority to enforce the interest that's set forth by the city in the pilot, which is the payment in lieu of taxes for the Community Reinvestment Act, the commercial properties tax abatements. When they sent over the agreement to us, it states in there 12% interest, and we just have never done that, to my knowledge. So we're asking for permission to enforce that.
I'm in favor of that. General Counsel, do we have to do it?
I would strongly recommend, yeah, we have this policy in place.
I would agree.
Okay.
We'll move it forward.
Very good, very good.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Thank you to Board Member Weinberg for reminding us that we never fully formally adopted it.
Right.
She's on top of it.
Are we having a small little intermission here?
Well, we can go forward.
Right on time.
That's right, on cue. He's pretty good on
Thank
entrances.
you. Yeah.
We passed it.
Okay, cool. It's all done.
Yes.
Great. Love it.
Now, protocol bylaws.
Easy peasy. Now this is the easy stuff. This is just the all the bylaws that govern that oversee the board. So you have a direction. So you'll recall that this committee was assigned to review the bylaws and that we would like to have revisions and proposals to the full board by May. And we so far are right on time. For this meeting, Phyllis sent out a notice to everyone on the Board of Education asking to look at the bylaws, get the information to me by today, which everybody did, except for me because I was doing the other thing. Well, I will have mine next time. But today we have everybody's revisions, and there are a number of ways that we can go about this. I talked with Mary and Eve before the meeting about how we want to move forward with this because this is a lot. And so what we have sort of elected to do is I want to outline the timeline for people. Today, we're going to let Miss Weinberg is going to discuss her revisions. Miss Bolton is fine with not doing that. She said, I believe, unless you change your mind, which you're more than welcome to.
If we have time.
If we have time, I'm going to go through and kind of give a high-level overview of alignment. A lot of these suggestions were similar, and a lot of them involve definitions of things. Thankfully, there's not 6 different recommendations for definitions. They're all pretty much similar, so that's pretty good news too, I think. And then between now and our April 21st meeting, us 3 will be tasked with looking at all of these revisions, finding where we see alignment between our colleagues, and coming back here then on the 21st to prepared to give our own individual recommendations for we think these should move forward in the bylaws, reach consensus on that in that meeting. So teaser for our next meeting, Phyllis, April 21st, is largely bylaws. And we'll have other things, I'm sure, but we'll try to keep it to this, because then on that Monday, so this is a lot of fair warning, on that Monday board meeting, April 24th, we will want to have recommendations to the Board of Education as far as here is what we believe should happen in the bylaws. At that time, the board will be able to talk about it, offer feedback, and if everything goes as I just described, by the end of May, we will absolutely have something to vote on, I think, as a board. Did I do okay?
You did great.
Okay.
You did great.
Great. So I will let Ms. Weinberg kick it off by presenting the items that she thought should be changed.
Alrighty, I won't take too long. So you're able to just pull up my suggestions, Rod, here on the screen. So basically what I did is I went through the bylaws and I kept the sections, including the number and the title. And I'm not going to go through each one by reading them word for word. I just will say that in my suggestions, I changed certain things and I placed them in red. So as you see in 0118, the role and the responsibility of the board, there was just 2 words that I wanted to add in addition. And I highlighted those obviously in red. For 119, duties of the Board of Education, there was a sentence that I wanted to add in section M. There was an addition in R. There was a time frame that I added right below that, and then a separate sentence at the end. In the next section, 122.1 member powers, again, I just added a time frame. I then went into section 124 of graduations and added just a couple of suggestions. In 132, I added a couple of sentences here for executive. And then in 148, for public expression of members, I added an additional sentence as well. I think as I ended up here with 148.1 with board staff communications, in section A and B, there was an additional sentence that I added in red. And then to end, 155 for committees, I think that, since we combined the one committee, we have to kind of go back into that and list out exactly the name of the committee, the full name. What is the full name? Who knows that and can say the full name? Would it been give the acronym for it?
Yes. The sit-up cow.
Yes. So just going through that and making sure that we have that and it's appropriately aligned with everything. And so those are my suggestions. In short.
That was very concise. I appreciate that. And one thing, while Ms. Weinberg's stuff is up, I'd like to leave it up there for 1 second, because one thing I did leave out. I'm glad I caught it wasn't for Phyllis. Thank you so much, for putting this together. What we would also like, if possible, Phyllis, in the next couple weeks, so that we would have it, is the way Mary has done this with the sort of red line version in the bylaws. If it would be possible, and some of this I realize could be more difficult, but I feel like every board member did outline what, yeah, they did. Everybody except for Ben put where it is in the bylaws. If we could put the suggestions just in the bylaws and then get it to us three, not everyone will need it, but us three, so we can do our homework that way, that would be really awesome. And again, not overnight, couple weeks, right? As long as we have it, I think, a couple weeks before our committee meeting.
We need it in 5 minutes.
We need it in 5 minutes. Mary needs it in 5 minutes. That would help us, and then be able to kind of go through it. So I forgot, thank you. Because Mary, the way Mary did it is definitely the best, I think.
Hey, see, that's the teacher in
And
me.
it's the teacher, and
Absolutely.
that's why, you're on policy committee. It's a long vetting process to get on this committee. Okay, and then I will give Ms. Bolton one last chance. Would you, you gave a lot of awesome philosophical suggestions that weren't necessarily bylaw type stuff, which we can talk about another time, I think. But do you want to go through your bylaws real quick, or no?
Yeah, the very first part of it is an old assignment about the seating,
Mhm.
because
Very
that's
good.
been an issue. So that really is very internal or inside baseball or whatever. I'll go through these quickly, but I do think that Mary should read too what she wrote there, so it can kind of stimulate the discussion. But I'll do these first. I love the first paragraph. The second paragraph is okay until we get to this reaches decision. We have an issue, an evolving situation, and it changes from meeting to meeting as to what is a decision, whether it's a vote or whether we've reached consensus. I think that language needs to be cleared up because it's very loose. And then add a sentence regarding board standing committees that speaks to the issues of voting, minority position being allowed to be presented. If I recall previously, years ago, and since we really try not to vote in committee very often in any one of our committees, we just kind of like nod and only occasionally actually vote. There used to be a practice that in committee, when you did vote, when we used to vote, the person that maybe was not on the winning side, this is years ago, could at least present where that position was and for what reason. Often it does not get captured in minutes. And so it's just something to think about, that doesn't have to be a rehashing, but at least a minority right kind of exists within committees, but we can do it or not do it. And then we'll have to add whatever the new vision mission is after we have this next phase of the strategic plan. Definitions, the 0100 definitions, I think some of these do need work. Policy as a definition sounds like policy is just our expectations. That doesn't sound like policy to me.
No.
That is way too soft. So I think that definition has to strengthen what policy actually means instead of a statement of expectations. The definition of president that exists now is chief executive officer of what? I mean, 2 staff members. And so the president of the board is the presiding officer of the board. That's what the president is. Nothing more, nothing less. Very important, lots of responsibilities that are delineated, but he's not a chief executive officer of the board. Let's see, the principal. I thought the word staff isn't inclusive enough for the same reason we mentioned with our guests today. the principal is in charge of more than that, whether it's community learning center stuff or the volunteers or what have you. And I'll speed up a little bit. Professional staff, I think that needs a rewrite, and I don't know what it would be, but also relative is another kind of weak term. We've talked in terms of caregivers. This looks like it's more like who gets to be out for sick leave, more than the more inclusive way we've been defining family. That makes sense. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. Secretary, that is something we don't spend that much time on, but the treasurer is also the secretary to the board. Just a legal terminology, we probably want to make that clear. Superintendent, I think that needs better definition as to what is more Cincinnati view. And vice president, presiding officer of the board in the absence of the president, that's what that person is. They have no special responsibilities or obligations.
Except to be president pro tem all the time.
Exactly.
If your name's Brandon. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead. Keep going. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
I meant treasurer pro tem. Yeah.
The presiding officer identifications review and or I'm not sure. I think that's my mistake there. General counsel and internal auditor under powers and ethics that board members can reach. I think we say that. Then we go to functions if we want to keep doing this, but anybody have any discussions or questions or thoughts?
No, I agree with your suggestions. Is all my only comment.
Yes, I would agree with them as well.
And so the rest of this from the other members of the board. Again, there were a lot of definitions that were called into question. A couple times, requests for info and assignments came up, as Ms. Bolton's already kind of covered this regarding, what does that mean, assignment in a board? What do all these different things mean? Other themes throughout, they're kind of, I don't mean this in a belittling way, but they're pretty obvious. We have to change the names of committees. This has already come up. So again, I'm just kind of calling out what everyone else said without getting too specific. When Miss Davis sort of inserts these, we'll have, I think, a better idea of where there is a lot of alignment. Trying to see if there was anything that was dramatically different or recommendations like, whoa, hold the phone.
There's one in there. Yes.
Well, there's are you, and is that from
There's
our
probably
president?
only one. There's only one. There's only one.
Yeah, from our president. And which one? I'm just curious, and because this is important to call out now. Which one did you find to be the most kind of radical? The request for information.
I was going to suggest that too.
There was request for information. The way it is written, add a requirement that board member requests for information that will take more than 15 minutes for the superintendent to complete require a board vote. And then it goes on from there. And again, these are all suggestions, and whether or not we ultimately take them, we shall see. So there are a couple procedural type things that I assume there will be some significant differences of opinion, and we'll talk about all that. And then on the 21st, and we'll present it to the board. And I'm certain some members, won't be maybe pleased with our decision to excise their suggestions, and they'll have an opportunity to get those back in there and garner support. But those are the biggest ones. I will call out that Dr. Moffitt shared similar sentiments to Ms. Bolton regarding language of that CEO piece. Also the superintendent. She also brought up, would like to include verbiage regarding caretakers and not just parents. I thought that was a very sound comment, and she was a real champion for that when she was on this committee. And we affected a lot of policies to that end. So in a lot of ways, what I think is fun about this process, and I'll be quiet, or exciting about this process is we are aligning the language of our bylaws, it feels like, based on a lot of the changes we made to policy over the course of the past 3 years, which is really nice. So the policies that we discussed today are part and parcel of that as well. So I assume we'll see some changes based on some of the progressive, important things we did today. But I'm going to stop. That's it from me regarding the bylaws. And then again, on the 21st, we'll revisit these.
And I just want to add that, going through and reading all of these, like you said, they were some really good suggestions. And I'm just really excited and happy that we were able to, start this process. I know we had been talking about it. So I do look forward to the next round where we're actually putting them into a document and seeing the difference, in red, and seeing how we're updating it and what it's going to look like for the future.
Yep. Thank you, Ms. Weinberg. Ms. Bolton, do you have any closing comments?
Well, we'll say that we are in agreement regarding Member Weinberg's suggestions, so that we've at least done these definitions for me. I just think we should try to at least get those two bunches agreed to within the committee. You feel comfortable doing that?
I totally do.
Because we have a little bit of time.
What is the question, or what's the?
Getting alignment, agreeing on the suggestions that, just kind of checking that off the list. No.
No,
okay.
I didn't have any objections.
No, we're saying we agree.
Oh, okay.
So we can
I was
just
going
check
to say,
it off
well,
the
I can
list
pull
is
this
what
back
we're
up
saying.
and I can restart. Okay.
Look and see if there's something we should talk about.
No.
I'm not looking for the business, but it just seems like if we could get the committee's agreement within
No, I
and among
understand.
us, then we have other things. Because there's great large sections that are requiring us to have some discussion.
Right.
Yep.
Not to mention thumbs up or thumbs down, what our colleagues have suggested.
Right. Yeah. I have no issue with Member Weinberg's suggestions.
I have no issues with.
Yeah.
Did you like them?
Yeah,
A little bit.
I think we can check those off the list if we want, and also the same with you, Ms. Bolton, with those definitions. I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah, fine with that. And we'll include them. We'll still include everything as redlined, so that we have, something to talk about and a guide as we go forward. But I'm fine with that.
Just procedurally, are we asking general counsel to make those changes that we have now proposed, or we want to wait till they're all done, or how does that work?
I would like to see everything in red line, and we know that these are good, and we're fine with that. We don't need to bring them back up, but yeah.
Wait.
Yeah.
Good to me.
Wonderful. Is anybody who's watching, if you would like, go ahead and raise your hand if you would like to say a few words. You have a couple minutes, and Mr. Rob will let you know. And while we wait for people to raise their hand if they want to, I'm going to see if there's anything under other business from my colleagues that we need to know about or that we can put on our agenda for next time. And then I'll get to Julie.
One of the things in it's on page. Normal, and there's no public speakers, which. I don't understand that, because sometimes it directly impacts the employees, but the employees are not even allowed to speak. But yet I'm supposedly allowed to speak at every subcommittee, which I would think would be part of the council. Maybe it's not a hearing of the public, but I should be allowed to speak.
Yeah, we had that discussion.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, is it what, Mary Weinberg?
I would agree. I think we had that discussion before in terms of allowing her to speak at the CAL. I would be fine with that.
Last, retreat, I've been going to more retreats than anybody else. And I was like, what? I can't speak? Shut down during COVID. I didn't like, but now we're in person.
Ms. Morton, you comment?
I'm gonna, not a different view, but an extra view. On the committee of the whole, the committee of the whole, generally, there's not public statement. And that's been for years and years and years. And the reality is the committee of the whole, actually, at least years ago, it was the president of the board would say hello and then hand that meeting over to the administration. And the superintendent ran that committee of the whole. So it's viewed much more as an administrative kind of committee to which the whole board attends. So it's different than the board. When we have had, I can think of very few times where there was a formal opportunity at committee of the whole to speak. What we've had is in a more informal environment, like we've started to do back up again, I think, in some of our committees where we have other participation.
Four or five.
Well, that was not the board. Yeah.
We've been in a period of transition and change, and I think that's why it's good to get the protocols taken care of. But I welcome if we have time and if it's on point, I like this, like when we would meet in the conference room.
Correct.
And actually, we changed our protocol when we got rid of, what was that public involvement? What was that committee called? Public engagement, CPS, or what was it, Phyllis?
Yeah.
Yeah. When we got rid of that, we put in these protocols, these bylaws. We said that we would, by getting rid of that committee, which was a nightmare, we would do what we're doing now in these committees. We would welcome public comment and public discussion and participation. And that's how we got rid of that other committee, and I think it's written in here somewhere. So yeah, I think that's the informality is kind of better.
And that's something, and to bring it back to the bylaws where I think, it was coming from, right? That's something that I think could be caked into the bylaws regarding all the committees, if it's not already, that we invite public participation. I feel like it is, but perhaps it could be reworded, and we'll look at that, on the 21st. Because I think it would apply to all the committees.
Can I also suggest, though, that I know that we're going to have a big discussion about public expression.
Yeah.
I don't, again, moving the meeting to where we've moved it is not helpful to the public. But more importantly,
The Cal, you mean?
Yeah. The board meetings, all that stuff.
Okay.
Is too early for people.
Yeah.
Not for us.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I got you.
But
All right.
more importantly, I do not like the idea of us moving away from the 3 minutes of testimony. You cannot, these are not people that always testify or talk or whatever. It's
time to go back.
3 minutes.
It's time to go back. Yeah,
I think we're still at 3 minutes maybe, but the
No,
2
we're not.
minutes and now we're gonna make it less. No,
It's all 2
sorry.
minutes.
No.
We never went back to the 3 minutes after we had literally 1,700 people or more coming to our meetings. We haven't gone back. It was 3 minutes up until COVID.
We should have three. It should be 3 minutes.
All right. Cool.
That was bad.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Thank you all. Do we have anybody that wants to talk to us? We have one? All right. Well, you have 3 minutes. We are going to set the precedent. If we could get a timer for 3 minutes, and let's go. I'll do it. How about that? We'll model good behavior.
Caitlin,
3.
go ahead and unmute your.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
I'll show my camera, but I'm driving, so I'm gonna turn my camera off so I don't
You want to
crack
be
or anything. Yes, I just really wanted to speak today. Thank you so much for letting me join you all. This was so interesting. Oh, by the way, I'm a resident of Silverton, and I also am an assistant principal in the district and was a former teacher. I just wanted to talk about, and the reason I brought it to this committee is because I think that it doesn't align with our work. Can you still hear me? Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you. You're good.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
It doesn't align particularly to our anti-racist policy, but just wanted to open a discussion around the current process we have with student searches. So I want to say that I'm not referring to the need to do a search with reasonable doubt. So if we get knowledge that somebody is going to bring potentially a dangerous weapon into the building and we search that student upon entry in the building, I'm not referring to those. I'm referring to like the scheduled searches that the security team does. I joined the district about 8 years ago as a teacher. I was a 6th grade teacher, and I'll never forget that first experience of, because I had never participated in one. I didn't really know what to expect, but it was really traumatic for both me and the students. I actually had them journal afterward.
Caitlin, we cannot hear you. If you can hear me, we would like your comments if you want to shoot me an email. I know you have my email. Because we cannot hear you. I will also send this note to you so in case you can't hear me. You got it? You gonna follow up? All right. General Counsel Hoying is gonna follow up because he's the man. Thank you so much. Sorry, our first foray into this 3-minute public commentary, so kind of went awry, but we tried. Okay, cool. Well, you want to let her know, Daniel? Cool. Thanks, man. All right. Happy St. Pat's. Have a lot of fun. With no further business to the board, I just want to, or of this committee, we will adjourn. I just want to say this has been an awesome process getting these two done, and I'm excited about the bylaws. So thanks, and thanks for all the help, y'all. Adjourned. Cool.